I've just been talking about Pras, and he is obviously the most high-profile manager associated with Solio. And this season, he has struggled in a way he perhaps hasn't in recent years. How much of this can be put down to variance, and how would you counter the argument that Solio has hindered Pras and his decision-making, and he would be better playing the way he was before adopting Solio?
Yeah, that's a really, really sharp question.
Recently, we have had conversations with FPL Fran and his pro-projections mindset, D-Unit with his anti-analytics argument, and Nick Trigger, who sees them as a tool to make him a better manager without being beholden to them. And now today, we have the man who inspired this change in my own mindset, who has made me believe in the possibility of the analytics making me a better maverick, and that is Trout from Solio. This conversation is something really special, and some of Trout's answers will surprise you. Nothing was off the table, and every question was answered openly and honestly. So get yourselves a brew and settle in, because the way you view FPL is about to change forever. So, today on the FPL Nightmare channel, we have a very special guest indeed. It's said in this world that sometimes the people who have the biggest impact are only in our lives for a fleeting moment in time. And in one 15-minute section of one video, this man may have reimagined my entire future in this game. For years, I have heard people talk about analytics, people pushing the projected numbers on me, people asserting with authority that the analytics give the ultimate FPL advantage, yet none of them were ever able to sell me the story. And then I watched this man's video and I saw this man, for some reason named after a fish, talking about using analytics to swim against the tide. He said if he was in the top 200 in the world, he would sell the best player in the game to chase that number one spot. And I listened to this man and how he talked about using analytics to become even more maverick, how to interpret the projections to minimize the risk while maximizing the reward, and how the projection models can enhance the parts of his FPL management personality that he holds the most dear. And I had to explore these programs in more detail. And this man, he doesn't just use projection models. Together with his pals, he has created Solio Analytics, the devilish side of the Sol versus Solio debate. And today he is here, and like the devil himself, he is going to try and lure me over with the promise of everything I ever wanted. And do you know something? I kinda want him to succeed. This is the projections pirate. This is the data daredevil. This is the Solio swashbuckler himself. This is Trout. Welcome to the channel, mate. How are you doing?
Wow, I mean that's doing so much better now than I was before, because that is not just the best intro to an FPL podcast I've had, but maybe the best way I've ever been introduced in my life. So thanks so much for that, Andrew.
I'm
doing well. I mean, I've been looking forward to chatting with you for a really, really, really long time. It's, you know, like I'm really enjoying the videos that you're making and the conversations that you're having with all sorts of people. I think it's really, really, really valuable. And I just love these kind of open conversations where we're not talking about like the specifics, but we're talking more about like the strategy and the concepts. I love having these kinds of chats. So I'm very excited to get going.
I'm very excited to have you on here. You, like I said, you have made a massive impact in like the WhatsApp group. Since you said you were coming on, my WhatsApp group has been ablaze with talk. I've had the anti-analytics be like, you've got to say this, you've got to say this, and you've got to put this to him. And I'm gonna put them all to you. But what I am looking forward to is getting into it with you. And what's interesting to me is that until about a month ago, I'd never heard of you, and I'm pretty sure you'd probably never heard of me. And then, like I say, my mate Trigger, who was on the channel the other day, he sent me this video of your wildcard, and he's like, "Oh, you've got to watch this video. This man, this Trout, is so entertaining, but it's got Pras on, so you know you're going to enjoy it because Pras is there." And so I turned it on, and I was like I say, I was very excited by the approach you were advocating for. And since then, last night I came across your on the wire, the FPL wire with Pras last year, and it's funny because you're talking a little bit about the program you and Sertalp are making, and it's like obviously that's become Solio, and it's just. It was funny, but it was fun, but it was also like a bit of a bugger because half the questions I had lined up were you'd answered them in that one. So I was like, I don't want it to just be repetitive. So anyway, to start, I just want to ask, what is your background in analytics? When did you get interested in them, and when and why did you start using them in FPL?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I've been playing FPL for a pretty long time, probably about 10 years or so now. I'm not sure exactly, but I wasn't always like somebody who even knew what analytics was or was interested in analytics. I started playing in the late 2010s, and then I actually went to university and studied maths at university, and I kind of became interested in like football statistics and football visualizations and all of this kind of lighter analytics stuff. And I became really, really intrigued about how can you build a mathematical model for FPL, because like we've got a lot of data on football, and we've got types of algorithms that can make decisions based on this data. But actually, FPL is a really, really difficult modeling challenge. I think I built my first like FPL analytics tool for my personal use back in like 2020 or 2021, which was really just a very simple tool that turns like player statistics into some very, very bad, but still kind of points projections. So that's how I got started on it. And then in 2021, Sertalp entered the scene, and back when Sertalp he was completely unknown by the FPL community. This was his first season playing. He got into contact with me and said, "Oh, I can see that you're doing some of this analytics stuff. It would be great if you could have a look at what I'm trying to do, which is a much more advanced kind of optimization than anything that I'd used before." And from that point on, we've been great pals, and me and Sertalp have been kind of working away at trying to model FPL better and use optimization for FPL for years now. And there's a lot of really, really fun problems to solve, a lot of kind of interesting ways of using numbers. And since then, we've made lots of other friends in FPL, and it's been a great journey.
Yeah. So that kind of leads to my next question, which was how did you and Sertalp and everyone else involved get involved into developing your own projections model for FPL, and why have you made it as detailed as it is? Because it is quite a detailed program.
Yeah. So we decided, I think probably in when would it have been? 2023, I guess, early 2023, that we really, really wanted to build an FPL tool, and we weren't really sure what that would look like exactly. Like we'd done a lot of kind of work on personal time, and Sertalp had been developing a lot of open source software for FPL solvers, and we just thought, we can really build on this, and we want to make a tool that has every feature that we want for playing FPL. We want to be able to do risk analysis, and we want to be able to build different plans more easily. And again, we weren't sure what that looked like, whether it was going to be like just a website where you could run solves. And I guess we realized fairly early on that really what we had to do was build like an FPL planner from scratch, rather than just focusing on the optimization piece, which I think is the thing that as nerds we find really, really fascinating. We got the team together in 2023, and haven't really looked back since. It's been a great couple of years. We've really enjoyed it.
Do you think these programs are cheating? Do you think?
Oh, okay. Right in there with the cheating allegations.
It's not going to. It's not going to be FPL Paxman on the case, but it just seems like a good time because you've You've obviously, part of the reason you wanted to make this program and these projection models is to become better at the game. Do you think, like, some people do think these are cheating, you know?
Yeah.
It's part of my moral conundrum. Is this cheating? You know, is using a program like Solio, does that detract from any achievement I earn in the game? Like, if I was to win the game using Solio, like Jonas did with his projection models a couple of years ago, is it a victory for me or is it a victory for the program? You know?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I've got a lot to say about this issue. First of all, I think I would say that, like, a key part for me, at least, of whether something is cheating or not, is I think cheating tends to have an element of deception. Like, you know, if you're cheating at poker, it's not that you're using numbers to try and win in poker. You're using, like, theory. It's more that, you know, you're actually deceiving somebody. And I think FPL is the same. I think that as long as you're not deceiving anyone and you're honest about the methods that you're doing, I don't think it can really be categorized as cheating. But I'd like to go further and kind of say, like, I think it's really useful to bring in the concept of what actually is analytics and what is the model, because, you know, it's kind of unclear. And to me, what analytics is basically trying to understand things better and using some kind of scientific framework for understanding things better. So, like, you can look at statistics, and, like, you can look at players' XG, which, as we found out with Bruno Fernandes in the last couple of weeks, is actually predictive of future attacking returns. You know, is looking at these cheating? And you can go further and say, oh, okay, you know, if I'm using these and saying, okay, he's got, like, maybe 0.3 or 4 XG per game in the last 10 matches, maybe that's going to continue and maybe he'll score 0.3 goals per game in the next 10. Is that cheating? And, like, where do you draw the line? Because,
well, that's the question I'm putting to you. Where do you draw the line?
Like, well, I mean, yeah, like, I in my opinion, this is all kind of the same thing. And there is no line in, like, all of FPL analytics, at least to me, is really just a journey of trying to understand on a deeper level, and using some kind of scientific framework, the game, right?
Yeah.
That's all we're really trying to do. And I think that if you think that trying to understand the game through a scientific framework is cheating, I just think that's misguided, because there are all sorts of other games where, like poker, I mentioned a minute ago, where we've, you know, made huge leaps for understanding these games, and people are better at poker now than they were 20 years ago. And I don't think that's cheating. I think that's progress.
I'm not giving an opinion as to whether I think it's cheating or not just yet, because the way I felt 4 weeks ago is very different to how I feel about it now. These conversations, certainly the one with FPL Fran, when he said, even if it is cheating, you know, does it matter? You know, what's wrong with cheating?
Yeah.
You know, it's meant to be a fun game. But the conversation I had with Trig, he is the New Zealand chess champion, and he says in chess, the solvers have made it so that, like, every game is predictable. You sit down and you know exactly what moves people are going to make, to the point where they've had to, like, introduce things like mixing up the pieces at the start of the game just to get it back to skill rather than, like, a memory test. Now, do you think the solvers are cheating? Or, like, do you understand why people feel like the solvers are cheating?
So I think there's a very important difference between, like, chess and FPL, which is that FPL has a massive kind of random element built in. Like, I could, you know, with chess, you can say for sure that something will happen. You know, you have perfect information about the game. FPL has so much uncertainty and so many, you don't know where a ball's going to land when you kick it, right? So, like, there's a very, very deep, really, really deep amount of probability that you need. And what that means is basically there's like a real cap to how well you can play FPL. Like I think that, you know, that there are a lot of people who are really good at FPL and have had really strong finishes. And like you know, even though I'm an analytics user and somebody who's really interested in researching this stuff, I want to play FPL like in a really interesting way and as well as I can for my objectives. Like I'm kind of skeptical about how much about how much better we can play FPL. Like
Yeah.
because there is so much randomness. You can't finish in the top 10k every season. It's impossible.
Well, this is actually quite interesting because it does kind of tie into this debate, but I looked up your FPL history. And what I found interesting is that in the last 4 seasons, my instinctive risk-taking approach has ranked higher than your analytical approach twice, and you have beaten me on 2 occasions, also registering the highest rank of those 8 finishes between us. As someone who is analytics curious, I look at those finishes and I think, well, you've won twice and I've won twice. So what is the argument for me exploring the analytical approach further when the results have been so evenly matched?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. I think so. Like reflecting on why I use analytics and what I find interesting about it, I just think it's fun. I just think that using analytics, you know, this is obviously just, you know, my experience with it, but I feel like I have a much better understanding of the moves that I'm making and like a better understanding of what it means to play in a risky way, and things like that. And that's just, you know, that's really not.
How do you mean? Can
In
you
that
elaborate
sense.
on that a bit?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that I'll elaborate on the risk thing because it's obviously a big part of the way that I play FPL,
Yeah.
and I think the most interesting part of FPL strategy and FPL analytics. I think that like 5 years ago, I had absolutely no idea what a high risk decision was in FPL. Like I thought, oh, it's risky to take a hit, for
Yes.
example. Um, but I didn't really have a deep understanding of why. And actually, you know, you can when you use analytics and try and learn about this stuff, and you know, you actually gain a much better perspective, I think, of what makes a decision risky.
Yeah.
So in the case of hits, for example, hits are actually don't really increase your level of risk engagement. Actually, sometimes they decrease it because, like, you know, there's like a human. We have, I think, biases that mean that if we're penalizing ourselves in terms of points, then doing that feels risky. But actually, with a hit, you're always losing 4 points. There's no like element of uncertainty about it. And very often, you're using that hit to buy a player who's much more highly owned. And so, you know, in most cases, hits actually reduce the level of risk you're engaging with. And that's just not something that I'd understood before.
It's interesting you say that because I made this argument earlier in the season. I took a -12 and like people are saying, what are you doing? You're killing your team. But my argument was, if I can predict which players are going to blank, then actually by taking a -12, I'm bringing in 4 or 5 new players, and that I've got 5 players who can like hit the big score rather than just 1 or 2. And so I'm actually decreasing my risk by bringing in more players who I think have a chance of doing well, as long as I predict which players like don't score very well. Now, obviously, I didn't do very well, and Bukayo Saka went and got like 13 points or something. But as a theory, like when you talk about hits not being the risk people think they are, I do tend to agree with that. But why do you think it is people do like kind of push back to the 2 hits in the way they do? Because people don't like them. They do not like the hits.
Hits, I mean, hits are another great example of something that, like, anecdotally, I feel like I have a better understanding of how much, like, what's like a worthwhile hit than I did without using analytics, because it's really difficult without the number 4 is a number, and it's difficult to break down what that actually means without bringing other numbers into the conversation. Like how many goals over like 4 game weeks. You know, if I'm trading a player who I think is going to score 1 goal for a player who I think is going to score 2.5, the only way of really analyzing that is to say, okay, well, that's 1.5 extra goals, multiply that by the number of points per goal. And yeah, it's probably maybe worth a hit, maybe not. It's in that kind of zone. but that's what I'm doing there is analytics, right? I mean, I'm thinking about how my decisions are likely to impact my projected points. And yeah, I think that this is it's without the understanding of hits in that way, it's really impossible to make any kind of statement about whether taking a -12 is good or bad.
It depends on the players and stuff. But to bring it back to them points projections, like, I have made no secret that it is Solio I'm looking at using, your program. The entire series I've subtitled Sol versus Solio, which is a nice catchy little thing. But also, I'm not interested in FPL Review or any of these other ones because I just don't find them. They feel a bit cheap to me. I'm not saying they are, but like FPL Review, all I think of it is to press the button and get the answers. It's like, what I think is like FPL Review is the answer book, whereas Solio allows you to change the questions, and I quite like that. But I want to ask about it because obviously a lot of people watching will not have a lot of knowledge about how Solio works, how it gets its projected numbers and the points and everything. So how do Solio formulate the data which results in the points projections? And is this formulation completely objective, or is it manipulated or biased in any way?
Yeah. Let me first say before, I mean, it's a big question, and I'll definitely dive into it. But the reason why we created Solio was because, like, we really, and the reason why I think we're so passionate about FPL analytics is because we just want to enable everyone to have the best understanding of their decisions that they can have. So it's not, you don't even have to, you don't have to follow what the model says. Like, I don't really mind. But by using analytics and kind of using analytics along with your own beliefs, which is another big part of Solio, you can actually get a deeper understanding of your decisions and, like, which of your decisions, how much does this decision matter? How much does this, change your level of risk engagement? That's like the core mission of Solio, really. And I think, like, that's to me the most exciting part of FPL analytics is that you can improve your understanding. But yeah, let's talk about the Solio prediction model, because on some the basis of the numbers which we make inferences from in most situations are betting markets.
Yes.
So betting markets, we use these kind of sharp betting markets, which a lot of the time professional bettors are also using. These markets kind of contain inbuilt beliefs about how many points Haaland is going to score, because, like, if the market is offering a good price on Haaland's goals, then I'm going to put my money. If I'm a professional bettor, I'll put my money behind that, and I'll say, okay, yeah, I think Haaland is going to. I think this is a good price, and then the market automatically adjusts. So then, if somebody wants to bet against that opinion, or like the kind of implied belief that I have that Haaland is going to score, like, on average over a goal a game, then they can bet the other side of the market. And through this process of, like, competing beliefs, which are kind of backed by finance, you kind of get really, really sharp, almost like wisdom from these markets. So from this, we can kind of get an understanding of how many goals a team is likely to score in a specific game, which is, like, super important. Obviously, that's kind of the foundational concept of any FPL model. You can look at the players' share of their goals within their team and make judgments around that. And all of this is, I think, pretty objective. Like, this is a lot of people putting down a lot of money on these opinions. And we've got a lot of evidence to back up the fact that these kind of betting market predictions are really, really good. And in most cases, if we had spent the last year putting together a model that leans more on historical data and statistics to generate the same numbers, we'd probably have a worse model, because leaning on betting markets is super important.
When you think of like international tournaments, it's often said that like England are always like the odds are a lot lower because the people are more prepared to just have a cheeky fiver on them. Does this manipulate the projections, this sort of thing, or does it not really just happen in that sort of scale for your average Premier League match?
Yeah, so there's definitely a few things going on. I think it's important to understand that like there's kind of different types of betting markets that you can draw inferences from. So most people, when they think about betting markets and getting inferences from betting markets, they think about like bookies odds from like popular bookmakers.
That is what I'm thinking of right now.
Yeah. So we don't use these because you're right. Like these prices that are very well optimized for like for how much money they're likely to generate for the bookmaker, and really kind of sometimes the odds that are being offered are like a form of marketing for these companies and don't really have any, there's more to it than just the implied belief. But we use other sources of data, like we use what we call kind of sharp betting markets. These are markets where you can bet for and like bet the over and the under on an event happening, which means you can, if you want, bet for or against a certain event, like a team scoring a certain number of goals in a match. And in general, these sharp markets, they tend to be a lot more predictive than bookies odds in the long run.
I see. So why did you decide on using the betting odds rather than some sort of combination of form, expected goals, fixture difficulty rating, all these kind of like hard statistics?
So we have kind of a belief that a lot of these things, these hard statistics and like all sorts of other things like injury news or stuff like this is all kind of on some level baked in to the market's belief.
Yes.
Right. The people who are making bets on this stuff are all, they're generally looking at this data, putting this data into models, and it's all kind of all of this is kind of coming together in the betting market, and there's like not really a justification for keeping it separate. I think that like if we probably will at some point do more analysis on can we get an edge on the betting market, and can we use statistics to develop some kind of like really strong edge in some situations. But I think our time is really better spent elsewhere, because there's obviously a lot of things in FPL, a lot of kind of places where points come from, which aren't really covered by betting markets. So this season, there's been a lot of this that we've had to grapple with, especially the introduction of DEFCONs has been like a really, really fun challenge. You can't, you can't really bet. There are no betting markets for how many interceptions a player is going to make in a certain match. So for stuff like that, we do use historical data for the players, for the teams, and kind of spin that together into a model for projecting DEFCONs.
It's interesting that you bring up the DEFCONs. So I'm going to skip around. I've got my questions like predetermined, but I'm going to skip around a bit. Because there's a player in FPL who is a real lightning rod for discussion in the instinct versus analytics argument, and that is Joachim Andersen. Now, the analytics crowd argue his projected points are so good because of Fulham's expected goals conceded and now the DEFCONs, but the instinctive players point out Fulham are poor defensively. They've only kept 8 clean sheets in 54 Premier League games, and projected points do not account for the fact that Fulham always contrive to concede. Why do projection models struggle with a player like Andersen, who is ranked 31st among defenders, 14th among defenders 5 million and under, and yet is almost ubiquitous in analytics teams?
Well, I'm going to disagree with you and say that actually Andersen is a great FPL pick, and we stand by our kind of default like belief on Andersen. These like special, so clean sheets, for example, we are directly deriving clean sheet projections
Yes.
from betting markets. And so our Fulham projections are kind of grounded in this sense, based on the kind of beliefs of the crowd. And
Yes.
that means that if you're welcome to disagree with our model, and I think it's great that people can have their own beliefs and get an edge if they feel they have it. But really, what you're disagreeing with, if you're looking at our Fulham clean sheet projections and like thinking, oh, these are too high, what you're actually disagreeing with is really the beliefs of people of the betting market, right? Of people placing bets. And that's like we've got pretty good evidence that over a really, really long period of time that this is a group of kind of a sample of people that doesn't really tend to have like specific bias against teams most of the time. So that's like one part of it, right? And then there's the DEFCON stuff, and obviously, like we weren't like expecting DEFCONs to happen, so we weren't working on DEFCONs like this time a year ago. It wasn't part of our thinking at all. But like I'm pretty confident with our DEFCON model at the current point. Like, obviously, we get a lot of people saying, "Oh, the projections for this player are too high." Whenever that happens, obviously we're doing a lot of tracking internally, and looking at, "Oh, this player is quite high. That's interesting," and manually digging into the numbers, and saying, "Oh, okay, maybe there's something wrong with our model." But we've done this with Andersen, and we're pretty happy with we're happy with his numbers as a baseline. And the reason he's 31st, we believe, is because he's like Fulham have just let in the odd goal more than we expected to. They've let in goals at the wrong time. They've they are like an average or below average defensive team. But the timing with which they've conceded goals means that the number of clean sheets they've had has been less than this would suggest. And the other part of Andersen, which is the reason why a lot of analytics players are buying him right now, is he's got really good fixtures. And there's, sometimes when a player is cheap, which Andersen is, they play for an average or below average defensive team, and they've got a few different places where points can come from. A lot of the time that's just a good value asset.
Yeah, I mean,
and
sometimes
it's
you just have to take
Andersen,
a chance on a player, don't you?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's I just think it's really interesting that Andersen's become such a kind of hot issue when he's just
a milk
in my
toast
opinion,
player.
I know he's kind of really boring, and he's just in my view, he's just a player who can get points from a few different places and has really outstanding fixtures coming up. And he's 4.6 million. Like, to me, that it doesn't seem crazy, but it has become a huge lightning rod for discussion, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I don't like. I think it's strange how, like I say, such a nondescript player seems to generate such fury among some people to some degree. Like, my mate D-Unit, who was in the series, he's obsessed with him. Like, he will not stop going on about Andersen. It's like, what are you going on about?
And I do think that's great. Like, I really think that part of the analytics approach should be building systems where we can understand our own beliefs better and make decisions based on these beliefs. And you're totally welcome to think that Andersen is a bad FPL asset. Like that's I won't support you on that, but it's like fine for you to think that. But what analytics helps you to do is like pick apart where those points come from. You can see, okay, are we projecting too many clean sheets? I don't think we are. Are we projecting too many DEFCON points? Well, you can dig into that and make your own assumption. How many points, and how many points is he going to get from attacking returns? Probably not that many, but this is all stuff that you can, with an analytics framework, you can break it apart and understand like the opinion that a player is a bad asset, right? Is composed of all of these layers. And I think that it's a mistake to say that, make a judgment like that without picking them apart and really understanding what's driving the points.
Yeah, I suppose the other argument as well is that because your projections are derived from the betting markets, they're backed by people prepared to put the money where the mouth is, whereas the kind of people who aren't, people who are like doing him down, are just doing it for fun. So there is a different kind of element to it from that. But like, I feel like what you're not doing a good job of selling Solio here, because you haven't mentioned once that if I don't agree with Andersen, I can just lower him in the
exactly. Well, thanks for doing my job for me, Andrew. But yeah, like, so we built Solio on a few pillars that we wanted in an FPL tool for our basically for our own purpose. Like, I like being able to say, oh, if this team is slightly better, how much does that affect my decisions? So that's it's a really, really foundational principle that we've built on, of just saying, hey, the projections are really just a default. If you want to make a team better, if you think a team are like going to score 10% more goals than we think, you're welcome to just edit that.
Yeah.
And we've built a user interface for editing all of these beliefs. So how many goals and assists players are going to get, how strong the teams are. Minutes is, again, like, we've really spent a lot of time thinking about what is what's the important part of predicting player minutes, and we've built an interface for predicting player minutes that we're really pleased with.
Yeah. With regards to projections, one aspect in pre-season, obviously Solio rated T elements very highly, which did not translate to reality, and that was based on his expected penalty share. Now, Dominic Szoboszlai saw his projected points take a massive boost after he took a penalty last week or the week before, yet only 7 of the top 25 attacking players for points have taken penalties, and only 4 of the top 10. Why are penalties so overpowered in projection models?
That's a good question. I think the main reason is because penalties are, you can really depend on penalties. We obviously don't really consider, we don't, there's a separation in our model between goals and penalty goals. But if you're on penalties, you're basically scoring an extra goal every 5 games. And that's like, that's actually a lot. I mean, that's, the difference between a player who scores 0.2 goals per match and 0.4 goals per match is absolutely enormous. I mean, that's a completely different class of FPL asset. Bruno Fernandes, for example, he's a great asset. I think he's a good player. And he'd still be a decent FPL asset without penalties. But with penalties, I think he's just like stratospherically good. It's that kind of, that bump in, scoring that extra goal per 5 games. It doesn't feel like a lot, but that is absolutely make or break in most situations. And I mean, to answer your question directly, the reason why most attacking players who are scoring well don't take penalties is because most players don't take penalties. But actually, the proportion of players who do take penalties in that statistic you said is obviously way higher than the proportion of players who actually do take penalties, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I suppose
taking a penalty makes you much more likely to be a really good FPL asset.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, like, I could keep running those numbers a bit further back, and at the same time, it's like there's only 20 teams in the league. There's only so many penalty takers. Like, half the teams aren't going to get many penalties because they're defensive teams, and there's only so much. Like, for all, I've framed those statistics very carefully, because the top 3 players are Haaland. Well, I think the top 4 players are Haaland, Semenyo, Bruno Fernandes, and Igor Thiago, and they are all penalty takers. So certainly the 4 of the top 5. So it's just interesting how, like, to me, how someone like Szoboszlai takes 1 penalty and then gets such a big boost.
I mean, really, I can't understate enough how important that, like, extra 0.2 or something goals per 90 is. I mean, there are very few players who like the difference. There are differences, obviously important differences between players, but even though it doesn't sound like a lot, that is usually enough to overcome, most differences between most players who play in the same position. It really is enormous.
Well, speaking of these kind of small differences making a big impact, one question that I've been asked to ask is that when the differences between like players on an individual game week or over a period of time are quite small, like for some players it could be like 4.3 versus 4.1. How much of that actually just comes down to chance, and what is the benefit of like putting so much time into researching this stuff when the differences are so marginal?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very fair question. Like me personally,
I'm not trying to trick you.
No, I know. The difference between a player who's projected 4.1 versus 4.3 is like, it's really small. You're right. It doesn't really matter. I could make the wrong decision on that every week, and I'd still end up like across the season only losing a few points. So like I personally play in a way that like I play to try to, as we'll probably talk about, like I try to maximize the amount of fun that I have
Yes.
in FPL. And I'm not so interested, like most analytics players are, in just maximizing the number of points that I project my team to score, because I think it's kind of boring. And you're right. Most players, like often you're making these really, really marginal decisions where you're sacrificing in the grand scheme of things, almost nothing to just go with your heart. But I would ask, like, I guess I would ask, like, what else would you base that decision on? Because if you have, like, if you have your a belief that a player is going to do better than that player, and they're only projected, 0.2 worse on Solio, then you can inject that belief into Solio and say, oh, okay, now this player is better. But it's always really useful when your kind of instinct is at odds with the projections. I think it's really useful to break that down, and I think that's why being able to insert your beliefs is so critical, because it really helps you by adjusting like the nudging a team's defensive strength over a little bit, seeing the impact that has on the player's projected points is kind of like, yeah, it's really, really invaluable, I think.
Do the projections factor in things like who's at home, who's away?
Yeah,
that's like history in the fixture and these sorts of like kind of intangible things. And also to expand upon that, when you are looking to decide between two players, do you ever look for intangibles that override your projections, and which ones do you look for, and what makes you act upon the intangibles and reject the projections?
So to answer your question about like home field advantage, I don't think it's intangible at all. We've got a lot of historical data and even just a lot of data from the current season about how how many more goals teams score when they play at home, and it's very, very tangible, and that is of course built into the model. The other thing you asked about is about like historical fixture results, like who won in the same fixture last year or 6 months ago. And
Erling Haaland this weekend plays West Ham. We're recording just before game week 17. I think I read he's got 9 goals in 6 games against West Ham. So, like, would that be factored into all this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I used to be really, really interested in this question about like, does that actually make Haaland more likely to score against West Ham than if he'd only scored 3 in the last 6 matches? And the answer is actually pretty clearly no. There's not a lot of predictive value from looking back one or two years. All of the important stuff is kind of is current. When Haaland kicks like shoots into the goal, like the kind of position of his foot there is not, he's not thinking, oh, a year ago I scored against this team, and that's not, that's not making him better at shooting. I mean, obviously that's a huge oversimplification, but basically, you can these things that you're calling intangibles are actually very tangible. You can look into statistics and use them to get a better understanding of how much they matter. And home field advantage definitely does matter a huge amount. Whereas, historical goal records doesn't really matter.
What about like something like the manager of the opposition team? Like Eberechi Eze earlier in the season scored the hat-trick against Spurs, and obviously the Spurs manager had like mocked him a little bit, laughed about the thought of signing him, and there's all that history. How much of that sort of narrative thing can factor into projections, or is that sort of thing, which I actually do like take quite a bit of interest in, is that something I need to kind of reject if I want a more consistent result?
Well, so like my personal opinion on this is that most of the time the narrative things don't matter as much as we think they do. Often we're trying to looking back and trying to find reasons why certain things have happened. I mean, not just in football, but in life. And we're kind of, we're looking back and trying to understand why things has happened. And you see what you think back to what a player said 2 days ago, and you think, oh, maybe that's why. Whereas really a lot of this stuff is, football has so much randomness, and the way that players play varies like massively from week to week, because like shooting a shot is a random process, and the bounce of the ball is unpredictable. So
would you say that the Eze hat-trick, for example, was more a case of preparation meeting opportunity rather than it being some sort of like narrative driving him to perform better, in that it's more the tactics of the team and the team they're playing, and how well he's feeling in himself, how injury free he is, all that sort of thing funneled into these 3 moments where he scores, rather than I'm going to get one back at them because the manager laughed at the idea of signing me, kind of thing.
Yeah, like personally, I think that's true. I think that narratives play less of a role in performances than most people think they do. But I would also say that this if narratives do have an impact, and sometimes I'm sure that sometimes they do. Like, it would be interesting to do analysis on this, but like maybe players do put in more effort and kind of run more when they're like looking to sign a new contract or something. I mean, that's been I think often people have claimed that a lot, and there might be some truth to it.
No salaries.
Yeah.
There was a few players at Newcastle over the years who you could always tell when they were up for a new contract, because they turn into the best version of themselves, and then they get the contract, and like a week later they're injured.
Yeah. But I think it's important that, if this stuff is real and it's measurable, and maybe it is, we should expect these beliefs to be captured in the betting markets. Like that's if there's like value there to be exploited, then people will exploit it in the betting markets where there's money to be made on this stuff. So like my general belief is that most of the time, like pretty much all of the time, narratives like this we can, all of this should be captured in betting markets.
Yeah.
And that's that's why they're so helpful, because you can be sure that you're most of the time, all of the time, you're not really missing out on important context.
My mate Nick Trigger, who was on the other day, he is the senior chess champion of New Zealand, like I said before. And he says in chess and backgammon, it's got to the point where the solvers pretty much always win because they are too advanced. We have already had one analytics winner in Jonas Sandler back. Do the solvers make future analytics winners inevitable? And how do you feel they will impact the game in the future?
So that's an interesting question. I think that FPL is there's such an enormous random component in FPL that it's someone playing, if there's a large group of managers that are using some kind of strategy, sooner or later, it's inevitable that they'll win the game, whether the strategy is any good or not, just because someone will get lucky at some point. I don't think that this is the case for analytics. I think that, so there's a few sides to this. I think that most people who use analytics aren't trying to win FPL. Maybe they think they are, but I maybe don't think they're doing a very good job at it. I think that analytics managers tend to at least not have any bias towards risk. Like the way that I play FPL is I really, really like to engage with risk, and I hope that this, yields more extreme outcomes. And I think it does yield more extreme outcomes. I think that if every manager who used analytics played with that kind of effort and like played to win the game, then I think that maybe we'd see more of them. But in the grand scheme of things, there just aren't that many managers who use analytics to play FPL. I don't know exactly how many, but maybe like it's probably in the 10,000s or so. I've got no idea. I'm just making that up, but that's like it's always going to be, I think, a tiny proportion of the player pool. Like it might always be less than 1% of the player pool. And if you have even if they're making decisions that like perfectly optimize their probability of winning the game, the 99% is always going to have a better representation among the winners of FPL, because FPL just has a pretty low ceiling for how well you can play it. And if I'm, maybe I'm boosting my probability of winning FPL by playing with all this kind of risk engagement by maybe just I'm like changing it from 0.0001% to 0.0003%, something like that. So I think we will see analytics managers win FPL in the future. Like not only Jonas, but a lot of other analytics managers have got in and around winning FPL. Chris, who's part of the Solio team, came, I think, like 17th or something a couple of years ago. And the difference between 17th and first is really just like, it's a few bounces of the ball. If you're playing to come 17th, you're basically playing to win. There's a few other examples of analytics managers who have had like really, really, really strong like top 50 and top 20 finishes. So yeah, it is only a matter of time till it happens again. But we're never going to live in a world where analytics managers win every year. I think it's impossible.
Do you think it's possible to kind of like train yourself to have a crack at winning the game? Like, do you think that is actually a realistic possibility, or do you think like Trig, who I keep referring to because I just talked to him the other day, he thinks you can't play to win FPL. You've just got to play to put yourself in a position where you might get lucky with, like you say, the run of the ball. Do you think you can play to win FPL?
I think you can play to win FPL. Yeah, I don't agree with him on this. I think that the thing that's so difficult about playing to win FPL is that most of the time it won't work. For example, like if you're like being really, really rigorous with it, what if you're ranked, I don't know, 10K in game week 37? What decision are you going to make to maximize your chances of winning the game from that position? You've got to do something absolutely mad. I mean, you've got to like hope that half of the fixtures are postponed and, stuff like this. Like it's playing to win FPL, unless you're already like at a seriously good rank, looks really weird. And like, I don't even engage with that level of risk. So I think it's like, yeah, it's easy to say that it will never work, because I think that like ultra high risk strategy is really unattractive, and most people will probably never want to do that. But I think that you can. I think that if you want to win FPL, I think that the optimal kind of strategy for that is just to engage with risk for a lot of the season, because you're going to if you're winning FPL, you're going to have to get lucky pretty much every game week.
Yeah. Right.
And all that engaging with risk is doing is giving you the opportunity to really ride your luck. You're saying, okay, if I'm in like the 10% of luckiest managers this week, then I'm going to benefit more from that. I'm also going to be hurt more if I get unlucky. But you do have to get lucky through the whole season consistently to win FPL. And engaging with risk means that, that kind of strategy, that kind of luck has more upside.
Do you feel like the projection models, as a rule, have kind of reduced the propensity for risk among the FPL community? And how do you feel like it has affected the game as a whole?
That's a really good question, and I've got some controversial takes that I'm about
that's
to,
what we're all
lay
about.
out here.
Get me some thumbnail headline grabbers.
Yeah, I think that the kind of advent of projection models in FPL has caused a lot of people to play in a way that's really boring and is kind of lame. And I think that it is like people who don't like analytics, like D-Unit, he says that, everyone has the same teams. And like I can sit here and say, well, actually with Solio, there's lots of ways to bring in your own beliefs and to like play to engage with risk and make different decisions to everyone else. But it's kind of true. Like, actually, most analytics managers do have pretty much the same team most of the time. And that's, I think, kind of sad and boring. And actually, there are a lot more ways of playing FPL and playing FPL analytically that don't lead to that outcome. Like, I'm not sure if it's like risk averse necessarily, because like I don't think that they're making any. I don't think that most FPL analytics managers are making decision based on risk engagement, and I think that's kind of part of the problem. And that means that like overall they're kind of risk like they don't really care about risk, but within the kind of community of engaged FPL managers and especially analytical FPL managers, it is risk averse because everyone has the same team.
Yeah. Do you think that is partly driven, like certainly by people on YouTube needing to maintain a certain level of a certain performance level, and by all kind of picking the same players, they almost kind of funnel the pool of players down to where the kind of risk is minimized so that it protects them? Do you think it's a bit protectionist?
I'm not sure that it's like anything conscious that anyone's doing.
Yeah.
I think that it's really a deficiency in the tools that we have available to us. I think that people only really started using FPL analytics to concretely answer questions about risk engagement only in the last few years. And like it's moved on a bit since then, but there are still a lot of unknowns about how you should play FPL in a way that ensures that your team is different to anyone else. I mean, I'm like certain that it can be done, and that probably FPL would be a more fun game for most people if people, built a few more differentials and all that. But yeah, I really think that there's much more progress to be made on, and that's why we're building Solio. That's like kind of the point of the tool, is to allow people to engage with more differential strategies.
With something like Solio, is it possible to say to it, I want in my team at all times 3 Newcastle players? Tell me the best 3 Newcastle players and when to change them, and build a squad around that? Or would it be like a process where I had to decide which are the best 3 players myself, and then like use that little lock button to ensure they're always in the team?
Yeah, right now there isn't a feature like that in Solio, and the reason for that, we've had a lot of internal debates,
quite complex,
and discussions.
isn't it?
Yeah, like I think we get a lot of feedback that Solio is already, we've built it as a tool that we want to use, which is why I think that some things about it maybe will streamline and like add a better onboarding process and all of this.
It's not the most beginner-friendly website.
No, it's not, and that's really a consequence of the fact that we've built this primarily for us. We've put in lots of things that we think that other people will enjoy, but there's always a kind of tension between adding features that we want to use and keeping things simple.
Yeah.
And I think that stuff like saying, I've got to have 3 Newcastle players in my team. is like a decision that we've decided to leave stuff like that out because we do want it to be, maybe not simple, because FPL analytics actually isn't particularly simple. It can be a bit complex sometimes, but yeah, we really want we want to. Yeah,
I know what you're saying. You don't want to make it too daunting for people to come into. You want it to kind of be as simple as possible while retaining the complexity that makes it interesting.
Yeah, but maybe in the future we will be adding stuff like this, and kind of I think that having a more flexible way of building constraints, so like you can have whatever constraint you want in your team, is something that we're kind of interested in doing in the future. So yeah, we'd love to have the ability for you to do that.
I have looked at it a few times, and what I found with it is that it works fine. Like it's fine. Solio's fine on a computer, but when I'm looking at it on my phone, it's an absolute nightmare to use.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm trying to figure out what is actually going on. Like,
it's a real. Let me tell you, it's been a real challenge because there's just a lot of there's a lot of data that you need to. Our aim, is, as I've said before, is to help people understand the decisions. We don't want to build a tool where you click a button and it tells you the move. And because of that kind of mission, it does mean that we're trying to show the user a lot at the same time, and we're trying to have all of these kind of insights about how you're engaging with risk and what your plan looks like as a whole. And that does mean that, it's like as a concept, just not so well optimized for mobile. It's really, really difficult, I think, to build a really good mobile interface. But it's something that, Solio has only been publicly available for about, I think, less than 5 months.
Yeah.
And we're working very hard to keep improving the user experience, because we know that for new users it is intimidating.
Yeah, but then at the same time, so is something like Photoshop if all you've been using is Microsoft Paint, and I kind of am saying FPL review is Microsoft Paint and Solio is more like the Photoshop or the DaVinci Resolve, or it's much more advanced, and that's what makes it interesting to me, is that complexity. So I wouldn't simplify it too much, but maybe just finding a way to help the common person understand how to use it. But then maybe that's not what you're after. Maybe
no, it is. I mean, we want people to be able to use the tool more easily than they can at the moment, and that is something that we're focusing on over the next 6 months to a year. Is we're looking at how can we onboard more users and give them a better understanding of how the tool works more quickly.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Right. So my next question, which I've not been paying any attention to because I've been we were talking about risk, and my man Nick Trigger, he advocates for never taking risk with captaincy and for instead backing the most favoured captain every week and taking your risks elsewhere. Do you think it's better to have a differential team with a safe captain or a safe team with a differential captains? And which approach would a projection model like Solio favour, and why?
So yeah, I don't really agree with Nick on this, actually. I think the risk, this is another kind of insight that viewing things analytically really helps you to understand, is that all risk, regardless of the source, so risk from your captain and risk from your lineup and risk from having low effective ownership players and risk from not having high effective ownership players and risk in the volatile number of points that a player is likely to score. These are all kind of the same thing, and they contribute towards the same thing. So in Solio, what we have in a few places in the user interface is this kind of distribution of points, which shows you this number of points is what you're likeliest to score, but there's a good chance that you'll score 20 more points than this, or 20 less. And yeah, this is it's important to understand that every time you make a decision in FPL, it does something to that distribution. It's either moving it to the right, so it's improving your average outcome, or moving it to the left and making your average outcome worse, or it's making the distribution of outcomes wider and engaging with more risk, or narrower and engaging with less risk. And these two operations of like improving your average outcome or engaging with more risk are the only two important things. These are like the only two concepts you need to really ever think about. And me captaining a differential player is going to have like a concrete effect on that on that risk distribution. I mean, like I love to captain differential players. Like I triple captain Bruno Fernandes. Unfortunately, the week
one week
before
he didn't do anything.
One week he didn't do the 1 week he didn't do the points. Yeah, but you know, it's a decision that I enjoyed making, I guess, and like I'd do it again in a heartbeat. You know, I'm totally happy to do that as a source of risk, and I'm totally happy to compose my squad in a way that engages with risk. Like I started this season without Salah and with Haaland, and I made that, you know, as a conscious decision to have a different team to everyone else, so that, you know, like my team was inherently risky. I also started with double Arsenal defense at a time where like my analytics rivals, none of them owned Arsenal defense. And again, that's something I did to engage with risk. Yeah. So I like all sources of risk equally, is basically what I'm saying.
I remember, I think it was when I was looking through your Twitter account, you said something about the triple captain on Haaland last season, game week 2. And you were like, the problem with it is that it's not whether, you know, you get 50 points off that triple captaincy. It's that when it comes to the end of the season, you don't have the opportunity to take the risk that can actually get you the biggest reward. Like, would you just elaborate on that for anyone?
Yeah, this is an interesting conversation. I think that tweet caused a bit of a stir because Haaland scored like 20 points or something.
Well, I went for him in game week 2, but like as it got to the end of the season, you kind of forget that you've got these points, and you just kind of want the kind of the difference maker in the mini league.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to your discussion with Nick, and I think he brought up something similar, that like there's a lot of logic to engaging with less, like, you know, playing it, I guess, a bit safer, or just not engaging with risk in any way, not really thinking about risk at the start of the season, and engaging with it more later on. And I think this is like kind of true and really interesting, because if my objective is to finish, like we discussed earlier, right? If my objective is to win FPL, then in game week 1, I might do some weird stuff, but like my team isn't going to look absolutely crazy, you know, because I don't know, right? I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 game weeks time. And I don't, you know, it's not easy to understand the optimal level of risk engagement for an objective like that. But in game week 37, it's very obvious what you should do to meet your objectives. And that means, like, yeah, if you're trying to optimize for an objective, it's better to engage with more risk later on, because like you have a much clearer understanding of what the impact of the risk you're engaging with is going to have by game week 38, because you're just closer to it.
Yeah. So like, would you say captain Anthony Gordon against Liverpool in game week 2 when he got a red card, do you think that was an unnecessary risk?
I think it depends on your objectives. So I think that like if you are playing to win FPL, I think you could make an argument that is like, you know, that's not a bad decision. Unfortunately, I would say that with like more conventional aims, like as I said, I don't think anyone actually is playing to win FPL every season. Otherwise, they do way more crazy stuff. But if your aim is to finish in the top 10k or top 5k or top 1k, like my guess is that that's difficult to justify, sadly.
Yeah. So would you when you say about the times to engage in risk and play it safe, when you were building your game week 1 squad, would you look at the projected points, or would you look at like expected ownership, and which like how would you weight those two factors into your squad building?
Yeah, so I looked at both, very much so. So I mean, the main decision that I was thinking about was like how many points do I lose if I don't own Salah on average, versus how much does that like increase my chances of a really, really, really good start to the season. And yeah, like with Solio, what we've tried to do is We've kind of merged. Sorry.
You're all right.
I'm too excited. I'm too animated by this question.
That's fantastic.
We've tried to kind of blend these these different things into one unified concept. So we have what we call like a risk engagement slider.
Yes.
And you can slide this up as far as you want or down as far as you want if you want to like play with as little risk as possible. And what this does is it kind of it weights the effective ownership and the amount of risk in each player's points into the equation. So you are actually solving for both at the same time. You're not just looking at like points and how like it's not a very like it doesn't have to be a manual process. You don't have to like compare these two teams that are both good for points and what happens if I do this. You can kind of just set your risk preference. I know that I like to take a lot of risk, and
so what do you set yours at?
I set mine to like it depends a lot. And one thing I like to do is like tweak it and see what decisions come out and like say, oh, this is kind of an interesting concept. This will raise a few eyebrows, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So anywhere between like 10% and 50% is what I kind of like to experiment with. This week I'm actually playing my free hit, and I think I'll crank it. I'll really crank it up because I think that you can have a lot of fun with engaging with risk on free hits. So yeah. I'm always very excited to do that.
Are you interested in like the stacking theory, like tripling up in one defense and?
Massively, yeah. I mean, this has been an obsession of mine in the last like 3 or 4 years. As trying to, like I said, build risk into the solver so that it can be a first-class citizen of the solver in the same way that points are. And just like optimizing for points, you can optimize for risk. And yeah, the insights that this kind of generates are absolutely fascinating. Like, I don't know if you've seen on my Twitter, I kind of released these, what we call frontier visualizations, which show like the highest risk teams and the lowest risk teams that still like try to optimize for points. Because what we found is that like a super high risk team, super high risk like free hit team almost always has 4 or 5 defenders, and it stacks them up every time. If you want to have a super risky free hit, the way to do that is like undeniably have triple of one defense and either triple or double of another defense. It plays a huge role in risk, and it's probably the most effective way, I would say, of engaging with risk, especially if the defense is not very highly owned.
So would you play that in a general strategy? Would you advocate for going with like 4 or 5 defenders and stacking them up like that? Triple Arsenal and double Chelsea defence long term, for example? Or would you say that's putting your eggs too much in one basket?
I think like it's quite easy to put too many of your eggs in one basket. The reason why stacking works better for free hits than it does like in general terms is because we're able to rotate our players in the squad, and when one player has a bad fixture, you can just drop them to the bench. But having all of your players all of your defenders play for the same team means when they have a bad fixture, that's likely to really hurt you, because maybe you do have to play them, and especially if you like pick up an injury somewhere, you'll definitely have to play them. So it does have like in the long run, it has a big impact on points. But if you're just looking at one specific game week and one free hit, just one game week, then there's no downside to it. So it's a lot of fun. And I do like to still double or triple up on defenses, even despite that fact. So like Arsenal, I started with double Arsenal defense. When I wildcarded recently, I got I think, is it triple Crystal Palace defense? Just double the Crystal Palace defense and also double Brentford defense. And I mean, like, it's when all is the same, I just like doing it because it leads to some crazy outcomes.
Through a combination of misfortune and mismanagement, I am not where I want to be in the ranks. One approach I am considering is to captain against Haaland every week, with the thinking being this offers me the best chance of gaining an advantage over the majority of the field, albeit at the risk of taken an absolute pummeling. Do you think this is too big a risk to take? What do you think the chances of such a strategy being successful are? And how could Solio help me increase the possibility of glory using this strategy?
Yeah. What's your rank right now?
1.6 million.
So I think this decision is always really dependent on your objectives. So I think, yeah, if your objective is to win FPL or get like
I'm not going to win it this season. I'm realistic enough. Like.
Sorry to say, I don't think you are.
But
This is why kind of being clear about your objectives is important, because if you want to win
I can
FPL,
get into the top 100k. I do feel. I feel like it'll take a big push. It'll take a lot of luck, but I feel like I could do it. But I also feel by chasing it, I could end up 5 million because of.
I think if your aim is to get into the top 100k, then I wouldn't do that. Like, I don't have any specific numbers to back this up, but like I think sometimes it's useful to see like how many points you are behind the top 100k right now, and think about like how many points per game week is that, and you'll see like it might just be a few points per game week. I think it probably will just be a few points per game week. I think I've seen a lot of people's seasons where I had one a few years ago, I think, where I had an absolutely atrocious start and I was outside the top 1 million for at least 10 game weeks. And yeah, I ended up kind of turning it around. I think that, the difference between your distance to the top 100k is probably like slightly less than you'd imagine.
I think it's about 140 points.
140 points. Okay, so that's what, like 6 or 7 points per game week. Sometimes, I mean, FPL is such a risky game that sometimes you can have game weeks where you score 20 or 30 points better than the crowd, and that, like, that takes already like a huge chunk of the deficit. So yeah, I would be a bit more, I guess, more sensible cautious about it. Yeah, I think that if you really stick to like if you use a model, and obviously models are really, really good for showing projected points. I think that if you kind of stick with like a lower to medium risk approach and make sure that your decisions are like not necessarily perfectly in line, but yield good projected points, I think that you've got a really good chance of being 6 to 7 points better than all the managers around you every single game week. So I don't think you actually need that much luck to finish in the top 100k, unless you're, I guess, not following the models and playing badly. Then the task becomes a lot more difficult because you do need luck.
If I was to go against Haaland, maybe not every game week, but in where there's an opportunity, what sort of points projection range would you say to look for in the Solio analytics points projections to think, right, this is a game week where I can take him on? Like if Haaland's 7.2 and Bruno Fernandes is 6.7, is that too big a margin to take him on? Or
I would say absolutely not. No. I mean, again, this is probably something where I disagree with most analytics managers. I am usually very happy to just sacrifice half a point or a point, at least, sometimes even a bit more than that, just to do something that really sets my team against the crowd and against what everyone else is doing. I love doing that. I think that this week, I am captaining Haaland, unfortunately. Like it's too big a gap. Well, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how fortunate it is. But I think that the gap this week is too large. And like I'm saying this, and I'm not really providing any reasons for it. And the reason for that is like we haven't really figured this out yet. I think it's fair to say. I don't know. Like I can't say for sure whether if I want to finish in the top 5k or something, I don't know whether I should captain Haaland this week or not. Like my guess from like playing around with the numbers a lot and running a lot of simulations and stuff like this in the past is that probably it's too big a gap. But yeah, usually I tend to if somebody's like 200% effective ownership versus 0%, I'm happy to sacrifice a point for that, or sometimes a bit more.
In researching this for this conversation, I watched your conversation with Pras on The Wire, I've said already in the interview, and one quote which stood out for me is you saying, "I cannot express the extent to which the solvers are not just giving you a solution, they are very much a tool you use to find the best solution for you." Now, this is obviously contrary to, I would say, the belief held by the majority that the primary use of the solvers is, in fact, to give people the best solution. Your quote is quite a strong opinion. Do you stand by that today? Do you believe it holds true for most users? And how do you justify it when you see high-profile people who use solvers all pushing the same players?
So, yeah, I mean, I absolutely stand by this. And I think it's so important. I think that it's really useful to think about FPL analytics as kind of two entirely separate things. I think the first part of FPL analytics, which is kind of more obvious and that most people think about when they think about FPL analytics, is like predicting what's going to happen. And these are like your beliefs, right? I believe that Andersen is a rubbish FPL asset and that he's not going to score any points. That's part of the kind of prediction stage of analytics. And this is where we're using betting markets to make inferences about and kind of build up these points projections, try and figure out how many points a player is going to score. And then that is actually, I think, completely separate to the solver part. What the solver is doing is saying, okay, based on these beliefs, not assuming any beliefs, but based on these beliefs, how do you make decisions in a way that best fits your objectives? And that to me is by far the most interesting part of FPL analytics. I really think it's fascinating that you can kind of separate your beliefs. You can still use analytics if you think Andersen's a bad asset.
Yeah.
But what you're using analytics for is for figuring out what decisions you should make that fit best with your beliefs and your objectives. So that's I think what I meant when I said that is that I think that the solver is a tool for making or playing around with decisions based on your beliefs and based on what's important to you. It's really not, projections aren't baked into the solver. They're separate.
That's fair enough. In the comments of that conversation with Pras mentioned to someone that if a coin toss had a 51% chance of coming up heads, the projection model would recommend you pick heads 100% of the time. Essentially, they will always recommend the highest percentage chance of success, even if the margin is small. In a game like FPL, how detrimental can this be to our chances of success? And what can we do to mitigate for the chances of success of these marginal calls being overrepresented in the solvers?
This is really important. So I think first and foremost, making the kind of default decision and like doing the first thing that the solver suggests and not looking below the surface. I think it's I think personally that it's really boring, but I also think that it's actually an okay way to play FPL. If you don't have much time, then sure, press a button. And I don't have anything against people who play like that. But you might, you never know what you're missing. And I think that people are generally surprised by how many different decisions and solutions are kind of equally good. And this is something that we've built Solio in mind for, is we really want it to be a tool that people can use to really dig beneath the surface and generate multiple different ideas. And so for example, when I was before the game week 1 team, I kind of had an assumption that of course I'm going to buy Salah. Salah's the best asset in the game. Why would I not buy Salah? Because I didn't have, I hadn't done this analysis and I hadn't looked beneath the surface and figured out how much worse the best team without Salah is than the team with Salah. Once you start to kind of pick this apart and dig beneath the surface, all sorts of opportunities emerge for risk engagement or maybe playing something that's more fun and more interesting. So I think it's super important. And by the way, you asked me earlier, which I forgot to respond to, how does it make me feel that people tend not to look beneath the surface and kind of tend tend to just play in line with the model. And I think like I don't feel angry about it, or I don't think it's like
you just feel
too
disappointed
bad for anyone.
in them.
Yeah, I just feel like they're missing out. I feel, if anything, I feel a bit bad for them, because I think that FPL is a way more fun game when you start thinking about risk and when you start looking at different decisions, and having a better understanding of these things, I think, is really, really rewarding.
Right, I've got a bit of a tough question, and I'm a bit nervous about asking it because it might come across a little bit rude, but it's really not meant to be. I've just been talking about Pras, and he is obviously the most high-profile manager associated with Solio. And this season, he has struggled in a way he perhaps hasn't in recent years. How much of this can be put down to variance, and how would you counter the argument that Solio has hindered Pras and his decision-making, and he would be better playing the way he was before adopting Solio?
Yeah, that's a really, really sharp question.
I'm not trying to Paxman you. I feel like it's something people would be interested in.
Yeah, it's important to understand. So I think that you can play FPL the same way every single year, and you're going to get an enormous amount of different outcomes each season. I could play the same way with exactly the same, like I could play with the same solver and the same settings. One season I might finish 2,000 in the world, and the next season I might finish 1,000,000th in the world. And that is the nature of the game. And you can actually run simulations on this and play through FPL seasons and see how many points you accumulate. But and you can see that even if you're playing exactly the same way with exactly the same objectives, it's the nature of the game that sometimes some seasons you're just going to get 100 more points. You're going to get like, you're going to get, because that's actually, like, in the grand scheme of things, that's only, I don't know, like 5% of your total points. That amount of variance is kind of to be expected season on season. So I think it's a mistake to dig too deeply into single season outcomes and look at more kind of crowd level behavior and see what like different outcomes are and the distribution of different outcomes. I would also say that we've got Solio mini league, and Pras is obviously a distant bottom. I mean, actually, I think he's come up a bit recently.
Rob T's bottom.
Rob T,
the man with all the statistics.
Rob T is different. Is by far, yeah, has had by far the worst season. He's had an FPL nightmare, but.
Well, this is how I found your mini team for my research by hunting the Solio league in Pras's mini leagues. And
yeah. Oh, at the top of the league, we've got Chris, who's also, again, using only Solio this season.
Yeah, he's about 32,000 or something, isn't he?
I think he. Yeah. I mean, a few weeks ago, he was definitely higher than that. He's having an absolutely stonkingly good season. And we can see, like, we've got a lot of friends who are telling us, they're using Solio this season, and some of them are doing really well, and some of them are doing really badly. And that's just the nature of looking at one season's worth of outcomes. And kind of, it's not even been a season. I mean, we're only, less than half a season of outcomes. It can be really difficult to make inferences from. I would also say that, like, analytics engaged mini leagues tend to be the strongest samples of managers over time. You would, I think, really struggle to find any mini league with 100 or so managers that performs better season on season than the so there's like a analytics Discord community in FPL, and they all have their own mini league, the big mini league with a few hundred players. And it's insane. I mean, like the average rank like a couple of seasons ago was like 6K or something.
Right.
And this, it's really easy to say with just one season that the tool's not working or the tool is working. But when you zoom out and you look at what analytics does on the kind of crowd level, it's really amazing. I think the impact. I do think so.
Yeah, I've just brought it up on my screen here, and Chris Musson. Is that the right one? 4,693. Yep. So there is the counterbalance there. I vastly underestimated his performance. But yeah, I mean, he's doing really well. And I suppose that is the argument, the counter argument to the Pras thing. But I mean, it can't be ideal when you think, well, we've got this superstar in and he's going to kill it, and he's going to make Solio look spectacular, and then he does have a struggle. But to be fair, I was watching Above Average a few weeks ago, and Adam on there said that in his mini league, there was these two teams, and they had a projected points difference of 6. And the actual points difference was about 169 points. And it's just like, how is that even possible?
Exactly. Yeah. There's just so much randomness in FPL that you can just, it's impossible to factor all of that out. But I have faith in Pras. I think he'll turn it around. Again, I would back Pras to finish up with a 5-digit rank. He's a solid thinker, and I think that FPL that Solio is the right tool for the job.
That's a good answer. Sell your product. You have said in the past that what you try and do with analytics is to divorce the outcome from your decisions, both in the sense of what has happened and what will happen. Why do you feel this is the best way to approach FPL, and in particular player and team selection? But also, is this not a bit of a safety net for the analytics community to say we can't control the outcomes, and is this just a way to make yourselves feel better if things go wrong?
I think yes and yes. I mean, it does make you feel a lot better when you have the knowledge that you're not in control of your outcomes. I mean, this is kind of like, I guess, like Stoic philosophy almost, right? If you have a better understanding of just how much stuff can go wrong, and it's completely out of your control, I think that you will feel everyone will feel a lot better when they kind of accept that. But I would also say that I think that analytics managers are also really good at saying, acknowledging the amount of luck that they've had when they have a really good outcome. I'm happy to acknowledge that my best season, I think I finished 1.2k or something. Maybe it was lower than that. I can't remember.
No, it was 1,043 or something. Season before last.
I had an astonishingly lucky season, and that's like probably maybe the luckiest season that I'll ever have. I definitely, over the next 5 years, well, maybe I'll get another season as lucky as that, but the odds are like against it. Whereas I think that, there's a tendency, I'm not going to name any names, but like, when somebody is playing FPL without analytics and becomes like the number one player in the world, I think there's a tendency for them to think that they've solved FPL and that they'll keep going on forever, and like they've cracked the code and they can share the secret sauce. But it's just not true. I mean, you can't control the bad outcomes and you can't control the good outcomes. You can only kind of you could just kind of control the margins, and your week to week outcomes are just not possible to control.
Are analytical successes more replicable than the kind of gut instinct, would you say?
I think that the evidence shows that they are. I think that that there's a mini league which I think you might have heard of, called Elite 64.
Yes, and there's the Analytics 64 as well, isn't there?
Yeah, and there's also the Analytics 64, which is kind of a league that's chosen as an attempt to select the 64 strongest managers in the world based on analytics. I think that the Analytics 64 group has outperformed the Elite 64 pretty much every season for the last 4 or 5 years, or at least since it's been running. I think that most of the players who have really strong season histories over the last 5 years, people like Tom Dollimore, they're all, they're very honest model users. It's not universal. You can still be a really strong FPL manager without using models. That's totally true. But I think that I do think that the evidence suggests that most of the people, or if you have like a really strong season history, you're more likely to be a model user than somebody who doesn't have a really strong season history.
Right. So I'll come back to that.
Okay.
Recently, Ben Crellin got a bit of stick for saying I don't make bad decisions when it comes to FPL. And this is a sentiment you also shared last year when you said it really hurts when a good FPL decision yields a bad outcome. I can imagine it must hurt even more when the decision is also bad. I wouldn't know. Where do you think non-analytics managers are playing FPL poorly and making bad decisions, and how can analytics improve these decisions and managers?
So I would like to start by saying I don't stand by that statement. I think that there was a kind of a
It felt
a
very
slight smirk on my
tongue-in-cheek when I was
face.
reading it.
Yeah, exactly.
Few drinks on a Friday night. Let's
I think
stir
maybe
up something.
I think so. I think I've made a lot of mistakes actually as an FPL manager. I think I think I make mistakes all the time. For example, I like completely misjudge. Like I told a friend a few weeks ago that he should captain Salah because Salah was at home against Bournemouth, and clearly I'd misread the minute situation completely wrong. And I didn't think that he was going to get rested for 2 matches in a row. I didn't think he was going to get dropped from the squad. That was a huge mistake that I made. I've probably made several mistakes like that on my own team this season and every season. So I definitely would reject the idea that the analytics managers don't make mistakes. It's not true. I do think, though, that the analytics managers tend to make fewer mistakes than people who don't use analytics, because analytics gives you a framework to really understand, like, oh, this change is worth a hit, right? I'm likely to benefit by more than 4 points for making this change. I also think that I'm not really sure why this has happened, but I think that analytics managers clearly tend to roll more transfers than non-analytics
Yeah,
managers. I don't
I
actually
find
know why
that.
that is. Yeah, I don't know why that is, but I personally think that like rolling transfers is undervalued by the FPL community. I think that like most managers should spend more time at, or would benefit from spending more time at 4 or 5 free transfers available, so that they can make all these big changes to their team without needing to take hits.
Do you think that's because of the projections showing that over a longer period of time, the difference between players is quite small? And then so it's like, well, because my mate Gary, who runs the FPL Pubcast, like I was on at him to change his keeper because his keeper was conceding every week. And he's like, I just don't see the point, because I look at FPL review and it says there's like 0.2 in it each week. So
Yeah.
what's the point in wasting a transfer or taking a hit when there's so little in it? And like, do you think that factors into why people don't take as many, or do you think it's just because maybe the projection models create a sense of long-term planning that perhaps when you're doing it by the seat of your pants, or even using like not basic, but like the more accessible tools like FPL Team, you maybe don't see that kind of bigger picture in the way a projection model can?
I think it's a bit of both, but especially the first one. I mean, like, I think that using like a well-defined analytics process really helps to steady your hand, and not kind of knee-jerk and overreact to big important like when a player scores loads of points. I mean, Semenyo I think is a good example of this with the Solio model. We thought Semenyo was a solid asset, and like kind of in the definitely don't sell him territory, but also wasn't like an essential must-have. I haven't owned Semenyo all season. I think that without analytics, it would have been impossible to think that. I think that I'd be looking at Semenyo scoring 10 points every single game week, and yeah, you've got to get him in. I've clearly made a mistake here, but seeing the underlying numbers and having an understanding of those numbers and like how well betting markets think he's going to perform, that really helped steady my hand. Like I never really considered at any point buying Semenyo because I just didn't feel like the outcome was particularly important. So I think that has an impact. And yeah, using FPL like using models does help you plan for the more long term. And you can really think about, it would be really good to have 5 free transfers available for this game week because I'm playing my bench boost. And you can actually map that out and see what impact that should have on your decision right now.
So if you did have 5 free transfers, like I have 5 free transfers. I haven't used any of the AFCON transfers we got. I used my free hit in game week 16, and I have got 5 transfers. Would you say it's better for me to make 1 or 2 changes and just kind of gradually build up to a point of the most impact? And is Solio something that can help with that? And would you at least say I should wait at least 10 days until this Tielemans inspired free trial kicks in?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it kind of depends on how good or bad your team is, to be honest. Like
I think my team's ace. Like,
yeah,
I have struggled and I took a lot of hits 5 game weeks ago, but because I took those hits, it's put me in a position where I'm looking at my team and I'm thinking I don't really need to make any transfers beyond like injuries and stuff like that. So
yeah, I would say that like it's very easy to be tempted by those 5 free transfers, but I think that we'll probably see again this week that the kind of managers who use analytics, I think, will make way fewer transfers than managers who don't. I mean, does Darius already made his moves, right?
Well, he made 5 transfers on the day he got given them 5 free transfers.
Yeah.
Then he took a hit, and now I think he's planning another hit this week as well.
Yeah, I mean, there you go.
It just seems mad to me.
Yeah, I think that having these tools to tell you that, like, you don't need to play all these transfers, or you definitely shouldn't take a hit here. It does help to kind of stay your hand in those situations, and yeah. So I think that I will probably only be making like 1 or 2 transfers this week. I'm also pretty happy with the state of my team, and I'll keep the transfers for when some more kind of interesting or crazy stuff happens in the future.
I'm not the only person like in the FPL YouTube community who is considering analytics. I know I was watching the Black Box last week and Luke was doing a great job of selling analytics to Az because Az has struggled for a few seasons and he's doing really poorly this season. He's really finding it hard. And Luke's saying to him to use the analytics, and it's the thing that's going to help him at the very least with his emotion management, but also it'll help him. It's almost like people that don't use them are going to end up getting left behind and they're making it harder on themselves unnecessarily. Would you agree with that kind of assessment? Do you think that Solio would be able to help us to kind of not only make better decisions, but also to cope with the emotions? I feel like I've already asked a very similar question to this already.
I see what you mean. I mean, like, I think it's, first of all, I would say I'm not like an evangelist, I don't think, if you really enjoy FPL right now and you're not using a model, don't use models. It's fine. You don't have to. But
I'll rephrase. He isn't enjoying FPL right now because of the outcomes he's having. Do you think something like Solio would be able to help him re-find his love for FPL again, to rediscover the kind of passion that, because it's like you say, the decisions and the outcomes are all, there's huge amounts of variance, but if you're not enjoying the game, you're probably going to start making the sort of decisions that lend to poorer performances. And do you think that the analytics will help someone like us or myself enjoy the game more?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think, as I've said before, the number one most important thing about analytics is that it helps you understand the game better. And with a better understanding of the game, even if you're not like doing what the solver tells you to or whatever, with a better understanding of the game, I think everyone would become a better FPL manager. And you're more likely to not make rash decisions. That said, I've had some absolutely miserable times in FPL using a model. There is something like about using a model, and when things just keep going badly, it's kind of uniquely painful because it's like maybe you start to have doubts. And I mean, I know this is true even when you're not using a model, but it kind of feels like you're cursed. It doesn't even, it's kind of nice to just say, oh, okay, I was playing badly, but I'm not just an unlucky manager. I've got a friend called Sigurd who plays really, really well. Like he's a really strong manager, I think. He's like finished like a millionth in the world the last 2 seasons just because he's had two absolute stinkers.
Yeah.
And this season he's like flying. He's like top 10K already. But yeah, I wouldn't say that like models are the perfect solution, or that they'll fix all your problems, because they might not, and you can still have a miserable time with them. But I would always advocate trying to get a better understanding of problems that you're trying to solve.
So definitely worth giving it a go.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
One of the major things when it comes to my FPL team is emotion management, because I get very invested in my outcomes and they do affect me. Like, I do my walking videos and sometimes I'm absolutely raging and I just need to do them because I've got to like function as a husband, as a father. And, so going out for half an hour and just ranting and raving kind of gets it out of my system. How do you manage your emotions yourself? And to what extent do the projections factor into that?
I would say I've really struggled in the past to regulate my emotions when it's come to FPL. I mean, like, I would, yeah, like I think that 4 or 5 years ago, when I was really getting kind of like serious about playing FPL and trying to, like, I was spending a lot of time on my decisions every week. And yeah, when things went badly, I was absolutely fuming and really letting it affect my mood. And that's true for like the positive outcomes as well. Like I would feel absolutely elated if I had a good game week and I was in a much better mood. And I don't necessarily think, like, I do think that models help a bit in terms of like, it is nice to know how much, and there's so much stuff that's not in your control. But I don't think that models can completely help you with this. I think that, like, at some point, if things are going badly for something that you care about, it's going to affect your emotions unless you kind of detach yourself from the game a bit. And I guess that's kind of what I've done. So I think building Solio has, I don't know, given me something else to focus on besides my own FPL team.
Yeah.
Like I was spending literally hours a week building software and tools that only I was using. And that kind of time investment, the only outcome of that was my FPL team's performance. So I really let it affect me. But now, obviously, like the work that we're doing at Solio is kind of much more important to me than my team's performance. So even though I'm still spending a decent amount of time on my FPL team, I just think it it matters less to me now. And I still do let it get me down. I still do let it. Yeah, it did really annoy me when Bruno Fernandes blanked when I triple captained him.
Yeah.
I was a bit miserable after that. I don't know. I mean, I've noticed, like, in the past, I don't know if you find the same with this, that I tend to get more and more engaged when I have good outcomes. And like, if I have like 3 good weeks in a row and then 1 stinker, that stinker will hurt way, way more than it would have happened if I just had 4 bad game weeks in a row.
Yeah,
like,
you kind of get like immune to the pain when it's red arrow after red arrow.
Yeah, I had 1 season. I think it was the season where Bruno Fernandes joined the league, and it was kind of like a, now I think he's the best asset in the game. But that season, the models were not very hot on Bruno. We kind of thought that he was not a great value asset, and I didn't own him for most of the season, and basically never captained him. And by the end, like, I was kind of enjoying it when Bruno scored, just because, like, it's just so funny that this keeps happening. Like, it's going to maybe move me from 1.1 million to 1.2 million, but like, it's kind of funny. Like, I can reminisce on this, and it's, yeah, exactly, yeah. And I kind of started to enjoy it by the end, but this season is kind of going okay, and if something similar happened to that now, like it was with Semenyo, I was kind of getting frustrated with it. Yeah.
Sometimes I find extreme outcomes are just more fun, even if they're terrible. Then just that kind of like tedious, middle of the road, steady progression. Like part of it does think if I do have an absolute stinker, at least I'm going to get a good video out of this. Do you know?
That's good. I think, like from the time I've played FPL, I've kind of realized that my, like, the good experiences that I've had, especially with the community and like making these fun, controversial decisions, I've probably got much more enjoyment out of that than I have with my season history or whatever, or using winning my work mini league every year, stuff like that. I obviously it's great, but it's much better to just be enjoying yourself from week to week, and just like, I would much rather have a good week and a bad week than 2 average weeks. So kind of a no-brainer to engage with risk when you feel like that.
Right. I feel like we've had a good conversation here, and also my wife's going to be home in about 7 or 8 minutes. So would you like to end by giving me one final pitch to come over to the dark side and join the Solio kind of community and to engage in the analytics?
Yeah, let's do it. I think that the most important thing, I keep saying this, but I'll say it again, is that it's not about telling you what to do. And it's not about changing the way you play, even necessarily. It's much more about understanding the game. And if you enjoy the way that you play at the moment, then that's fine. But like, I don't know. I think that having a better grasp of the game and like being able to understand risk engagement and things like that, and having a kind of a scientific framework to evaluate all of that stuff, I think it really helps. And I it's really just like an understanding thing. It's not about. It's only ever a positive. The better you understand something, you're not going to understand something a bit better and then you find you become worse at it. It's only a positive process of understanding. I think that with Solio now is the best time, better than ever, to start using analytics, because I think that for years FPL analytics has been kind of ruined by people playing the same way and being boring, because we haven't had tools which help us to not be boring. But we've built Solio so that you can understand what impact these maverick decisions are having, and maybe that's like a positive thing. I know it is with me a lot of the time. Is more extreme outcomes are really, really, really fun, and playing in a maverick way using analytics is definitely more fun than it would be without using analytics. I think that Solio is the first FPL tool where you can actually insert your beliefs and play based off your beliefs rather than the beliefs of the betting market or some statistical models. And that's like that's a big thing, I think, for most people, because most people disagree on a lot of different things. Nobody agrees with everything, and being able to fully control that is a lot of fun. And I think probably one of the only good reasons before for maybe not playing analytically. But yeah, I also think FPL analytics is really fun. I'm sure that I love FPL, and I'm really passionate about it. And I know for a fact that I would be less passionate about it if I didn't use a model, because it's just interesting. It's interesting. It's helpful. It's I don't know. That's what I think.
You've done a very good job of selling it there. Mr.
Cheers.
Trout, thank you for coming on my channel. I have thoroughly enjoyed the last 2 hours or so, and I'm sure I will be in your Solio Discord before too long.
Wow, that's really exciting.
Thank you very much. And so there it is. Trout from Solio has answered every question I have with both style and panache, and the doubts I had in my mind, they have all faded. The 4 conversations in the Sol vs Solio series, they have been fantastic, and whichever champion you stand behind, your argument has been stated so well. I can only thank the 4 lads for giving me their time and for answering my questions, and I am so grateful they have done so. And as for whether I will embrace the analytics, it is most definitely leaning that way. I respect the arguments made in their favour too much to dismiss them blindly, so I will take advantage of the Solio free trial, because I would be a fool not to. I will play around, I will experiment, I will see how I feel, and only then will I make my decision. I hope you hit that subscribe button and stick around to see how that goes and the impact it has on my season either way. And thank you for watching. We will see you next time.